You might think intelligence always looks confident, organized, and socially smooth, but what if that is completely wrong? Some of the smartest people display behaviors that look lazy, rude, or even self-destructive on the surface. The difference is, those behaviors often hide advanced thinking patterns most people miss completely. Here are 6 of them, and number 4 surprises most people. 1. Overthinking before acting. There is a particular kind of person who sits in front of a blank page for a long time before writing a single word. Someone watches them from across the room and assumes they're stuck, unmotivated, or afraid. What is actually happening inside that silence is something closer to architecture. The mind is building the foundation before touching the walls. Howard Gardner spent years arguing that intelligence is not one thing. It is many things, and one of those things is the ability to hold complexity without collapsing it too early. When a highly intelligent person appears to be doing nothing, they're often doing the most cognitively demanding work available, resisting premature closure. They will not simplify a problem that deserves its full weight. Society calls this overthinking. Psychology calls it deep processing. The difference matters. 2. Selective silence in social situations. There is a kind of person who will sit through an entire dinner conversation without adding much. They smile, they listen, they observe, and afterwards someone will quietly say, "They seemed a little off or maybe unfriendly." But watch what happens when the conversation turns to something they genuinely care about. They become a different person entirely. Carl Jung wrote about the introvert not as someone who dislikes people, but as someone who draws energy from within rather than from the crowd. What looks like social disconnection is often something more precise, a refusal to spend cognitive resources on conversations that feel thin. Highly intelligent people are not always unsociable. They're often just selective in a way that makes average observers uncomfortable. The assumption is that warmth should be constant. The reality is that depth requires discernment. 3. A visible resistance to being told what to do. This one frustrates teachers, managers, and parents more than almost any other behavior on this list. The child who argues with the lesson, the employee who quietly finds a different route to the same destination, the student who does not follow the rubric and still produces something brilliant. Benjamin Bloom understood something fundamental about how higher-order thinking develops. His taxonomy was not just a ladder of difficulty, it was a map of cognitive independence. At the bottom, you memorize. At the top, you evaluate, challenge, and create. The person who resists instruction is often already operating near the top of that map. They are not being difficult, they are thinking past the instructions because their mind moved ahead before permission was granted. Richard Feynman was nearly impossible to teach in a traditional sense. His professors sometimes had no idea what to do with him. He needed to rebuild every concept from its foundation himself in his own language. That is not arrogance. That is a particular kind of intellectual integrity that looks stubborn from the outside and produces Nobel Prizes from the inside. 4. Chronic procrastination on things that matter most. Here is the one that surprises people. Not the small procrastination of avoiding chores, the specific, recurring procrastination that surrounds the work a person cares about most deeply. The novel that never gets started, the business idea that stays a voice memo, the apology that never gets sent. This kind of delay is not laziness. It is, in many cases, the shadow side of a very high internal standard. When the gap between what you can imagine and what you can currently produce is wide enough, starting feels like proof of inadequacy. The intelligent mind knows exactly how far it is from where it wants to be, and that knowledge can be temporarily paralyzing. William James called this the gap between the ideal self and the actual self. The wider that gap, the more sophisticated the inner life producing it. Procrastination of this variety is not a character flaw. It is often the weight of unrealized potential pressing against fear. Understanding that does not make it easier immediately, but it does make it honest. 5. Intense, seemingly irrational distraction. A highly intelligent person in a meeting they find unstimulating will often disappear inside their own mind. They will think about something unrelated,
elegant and consuming, while nodding occasionally at the right moments.
The world sees poor focus. Neuroscience sees something different. Mind wandering in people with high fluid intelligence is often linked to a very active default mode network, the part of the brain responsible for imagination, future planning, and connecting distant ideas. What looks like distraction is frequently the brain's creative infrastructure running in the background. Confucius observed that real learning happens when the mind turns inward. That is not metaphor, it is neurological fact described in philosophical language long before the science caught up. The danger is when distraction becomes chronic avoidance. That line is worth watching. But the presence of distraction itself is not a deficit. Sometimes it is a signal. 6. Persistent, low-level self-doubt. The least obvious behavior on this list, and perhaps the most misread. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful men in the ancient world, filled his private journals with uncertainty, self-correction, and quiet confession of failure. Those journals became meditations. What looked from the inside like weakness was actually metacognition, the habit of watching one's own thinking, questioning it, revising it. That habit is not a symptom of low confidence, it is the engine of genuine wisdom. The person who never doubts themselves stops learning. The person who doubts themselves constantly is building something more durable than certainty. They are building calibration. The truth this video keeps circling is simple. Intelligence does not always announce itself clearly. It often hides behind behaviors that look like problems because the people observing them are looking for the wrong signals. What you carry quietly may be more capable than what you perform loudly. If any part of this felt familiar, there are more conversations ahead on this channel that go deeper into how your mind actually works and why understanding it changes everything. The next one is already waiting.